Hey guys, how you doing? It's good to see all of y'all. It's been a while since I put one out this week, but man, do I got a good one that was sent in now. This guy sent this in, and I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty wild what you're gonna hear. So warning to some of you that this stuff may bother a little bit. So I want to go ahead and give an advance warning. This is a kind of a sad outcome, and it does have some kind of weird things in it. Don't forget this Saturday night, guys, 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to be live. Sarah is going to be on the show with us. She's going to be co-hosting with me. Y'all remember Sarah. Y'all love her. So don't miss this Saturday night at 10 p.m. It's going to be a good show. And also, before we're on, go see D.A. Roberts over there at D.A. Ex Machina and support him, guys, when he goes live. And then come over and see us after his live. This guy sent this in, and it is a pretty chilling story. It's one I did not want to pass up sharing with you guys. Whenever I read it, I was like, I absolutely have to share this story. It is a story like no other that I've ever heard, and I'm thankful that this guy shared the story with us. It happened whenever he was a small child, and it happened in Canada, Ontario area, he says. He wants to remain anonymous due to the fact that there was somebody that was deceased in this, and he doesn't believe that it was supposed to be spoke about. So for his safety, he said he wants to remain anonymous because he believes there are still people in the town that will remember this case, and he said they may know who he is anyways, but he's doing his best to remain anonymous, but said this needed to be shared from his childhood whenever he was a child. Whenever he was small, his dad, his mom, and him lived in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. He said they had small chickens, they had rabbits, a few cows, just minor things. He said enough that it supported them and it gave them extra milk, eggs, and stuff, anything that would save $1. But the thing that started happening was very unexplainable. One night at about 1 a.m., he said, they were sitting in the front room and they started hearing what sounded like a music box playing. Like if you were to go into, a girl's room or something, she'd have the music box that opens and you would wind it up, playing music. He said it wouldn't play long at a time. It would just play for a little bit and then it would stop. It would then move around the house. His dad would follow it in the house to try to find out where it was going, and it would be at one spot of the house, and then a little bit later at another spot of the house, and they couldn't quite figure out what would a music box be doing playing outside of our house. So he said they got to thinking, maybe it was one of the toys in the toy box that they had left in there, or it was a toy lane that was half wound up. So they started looking in the bedroom, not real hard, but looking around. He said, they knew that it was in different places, but they kept thinking they was hearing it, and maybe they were thinking it was in different places, not wanting to really believe it there would be a music box playing outside. So his dad decided to go outside and check around the house to make sure that there wasn't anything outside out of order. They had an old gun, he said. The top barrel of the gun was a 20 gauge, and the bottom barrel was a 22. So he said his dad loaded a heavy turkey load into the 20 gauge and then loaded a 22 bullet into the gun, and he went outside to take a look around. He said he was hiding in the house with his mother while his dad was outside checking, and they could see the flashlight, he said, up into the trees and through the windows at some points, and out through the yard. He said they were sitting in the front room watching out the window when the dad came back inside, and of course there was nothing out there. So the night passed. It was uneventful and pretty quiet that night, he said. The next day, everything seemed normal outside. They went and checked, and the shed was locked, the chickens were fine, the animals were okay. Normal, ordinary day. The next thing that happened on the next night is he said they were sitting in the front room. His mom had just popped some popcorn to watch the night movie that they were going to watch. He said usually whatever came on TV because they didn't have a lot of nice stuff. So he said they were sitting there getting ready to turn the movie on that they was going to watch. And right before his dad had turned the TV on, right after dinner, he said, because they would turn the TV off during dinner and then watch TV after. And he said, right as his dad went to turn the TV on, they started hearing the music box again. So they start looking around, in the bedroom for this music box, trying to figure out where is this music coming from. And he said they were digging through the toy box, they were looking under the bed, they were checking, everything they could find, all the toys, and it wasn't nothing in the house. But the weird thing that really started happening that night is they started hearing a scratching at the back door. They'd never heard this before, he said. He said, we've never heard a scratch at the back door. So his dad, again, grabs the gun, goes into the kitchen, and he's standing there in this dark kitchen looking down the hallway into the utility room to the back door, the laundry room. He's sitting there listening, and he hears the scratching down the back of the door. They hear the music box, and they cannot quite figure out, why are we hearing a music box? So the dad, he said, goes to the back door, gets even closer, and squats down, trying not to make any noise, guarding the door. He's afraid whatever's out there may try to come through the door. The music stops, and the door handle rattles. Now we know, guys, they do check the doors a lot. It's not uncommon for them to check doors and windows and stuff like that. Said my dad aims at the door. But whenever he aims at the door, he said we didn't hear it, but we noticed that my dad immediately pulled his gun up as if he shouldn't have been aiming at the door, and they thought, what's going on with Dad? And he gets up and he comes to the front room really fast, and he's like, I got to go outside, y'all stay in the house. And he said, my mom says, why do you have to go outside? And he says, I heard a little kid. And they're like, there's no way there's a kid out there. It's late at night. They live in the middle of nowhere. They have no neighbors, for a mile or so away, he said. And heard a little kid. So he said Dad was so sure that he heard a kid that he's throwing his ball cap on. I mean, he's putting his pants on. He said, he grabs a gun and he goes outside and he's looking with the flashlight. He said, again, we're sitting in the front room and we don't see anything. He said, we see Dad outside looking up in the trees, looking on the house. Comes back inside, and they said he just sits on the couch. He said Mom starts talking to him, asking him, what do you mean you heard a kid? There's no way there could be a kid outside, not out here in the dark. It's too late. We're in the middle of nowhere. And he says, I heard a kid whimper. And she says, are you sure it just went one of the animals out there or something? She said, Dad's sitting there rubbing his head, he said, and he's like, no, what I heard wasn't an animal. And it really bothered him. So he said, we continued to watch the movie, but Dad really couldn't get involved in it. He said you could tell he was really bothered. He would keep getting up and going to the bathroom. Went to the kitchen, he said, and made him a glass of milk, and he's watching the movie, trying to watch the movie, and he said Dad did not smoke a lot, but that night he actually got his pipe out, had a pipe. And for a lot of you don't know the way he's smoking a pipe. And he said Dad was really, really bothered. So he says, the next day they were outside and his dad was talking to the neighbor that lived about a mile away, and he was, wanting to tell the neighbor, but he didn't tell the neighbor, but he asked the neighbor, he's like, anything strange been going on down around your house, or whatever? And the neighbor's like, no, not that we've noticed. So again, he thought maybe I did hear something that wasn't out there, an owl or something, or it's a toy, he didn't know. He was looking for anything he could blame on it. So the next night would probably be a little more eventful, I think. Again, at about 1 in the morning, they start hearing the music box play again. This time Dad gets up. He cannot figure out what in the world is going on. But this night is going to be different than most nights, because in the distance there's rain coming. You can hear the thunder. He said you can see the flashes of the lightning through the windows. He said they didn't have a yard light. They lived in the middle of nowhere in the dark. And he said the lightning's flashing outside, and you can kind of see out through the fields and stuff as the lightning flashes. And The rain's not quite there yet, but the cool air is. And he said, it's blowing through the windows. His mom kept the windows open, in the evening. Really nice night. But they're hearing this music box again. And he says, Dad gets a little more worried this time. He said we could actually see the beads of sweat on his head. And he was gripping the gun pretty tight, sitting on the couch. And then again that night, while they were sitting there, they start hearing the scratching on the back door. Dad gets up, walks to the hallway again, the little area where the laundry room's at, the back door. And he's sitting there with his gun. He doesn't aim at the back door this time. He said he's listening more than he's aiming his gun. And while he's sitting there, staring at the thing, he said, Mom and I were sitting in the front room, and we heard something scratching on the screen of the window. And he said, of course, we panicked because we're hearing all this weird stuff. Dad's upset. Dad's nervous. They know something's out of place. So he said, Mom and I look at the window, and there's a little boy looking through the window with red hair, big round eyes, and his mouth wide open. He said he bangs on the screen twice with his face, and then he's gone. They screamed for their dad, and their dad come running to the front room saying, What'd you see? What'd you see? What's going on? What's going on? He said, we were hysterical. Mom is crying. She's trying to cover him with the blanket that was on the couch. He said they kept a heavy blanket on the couch. So when the mom seen this, she grabbed the heavy blanket and threw it over him and laid over him and was crying, trying to protect him. The dad runs outside, of course. Looking again, he doesn't find anything. But the next day, the dad decides to go back. It's been raining, so there's a good chance you're going to find something. So the dad decides to go outside and check. This time, when he goes outside, to his surprise, he finds under the window a large three-toed footprint. She said his dad measured it, and the footprint was approximately 18.5 inches long by 9 inches wide. He said it bothered his dad really bad when he found that footprint because there was more that led off behind the chicken house and into the rocky pasture, he said, where the footprints couldn't be seen as well because it was more rocky, he said, than dirt, and that's where they kept the sheep. Well, Dad's pretty bothered. The mom's really bothered at this time. So they decided the next night they're going to lock the house down, close the windows, put up heavy curtains, and they're just going to listen that night. A lot like what we did at my granny's. It reminded me a lot of that. So they went inside at night, he said, and they locked down the house. Dad locked the windows, locked the doors, even slid the couch across the front room door, and he said Dad grabbed the washer and dryer machine and moved them at the back door. They're barricading him pretty good. Dad, you can tell, is pretty worried. So while they're sitting in the house, again they hear the little music box play, but this time not very long, just ding, 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 and then it stops. Everything stops. They start hearing a banging out at the chicken house, and of course he heard the chickens going crazy, right? So he jumps up, grabs his gun. He says, I'm going to the chicken house. I got to check what's in the chickens. Shuts the door behind him, tells the wife to push the couch. He said, me and Mom pushed the couch across the front of the door. Dad goes out with the flashlight to the chicken house, right? Well, when Dad gets to the chicken house, he's checking inside the chicken house, and everything appears to be fine. The chickens are flying. They're not up on their roofs. It's dark. So he's able to tell something bothered the chickens. The chickens would not be off their roost at night unless something had bothered them or spooked them. So he knows something's not normal. So the dad starts looking around inside of the chicken house for a snake or a possum. He thought maybe something had got in there, a coon that had riled up the chickens. After he looked inside and he found the chickens were fine, he heard something on the outside kind of skirmishing around in the bushes. He said there was like small bushes around the side of the chicken house that they couldn't cut down when they would mow, and Dad usually left them anyways. The chickens, he said, would peck the berries and stuff off the small bushes. When the dad went outside, he saw something he didn't expect to see. When he looked at the back of the chicken house, he saw a little kid's head, like a 5-year-old, small kid. He said, really young, looked around the side of the chicken house at him, but it was weird. It wasn't like he was standing behind the chicken house. It was like he was kind of like parallel. You couldn't see his body, but like parallel, and only his head stuck out at him. And then his head went back. Red-headed kid, big eyes. So the dad was panicked for a second, said he couldn't move, he couldn't believe what he had just seen, because out there should not be a kid, and especially to look like that. That was way, way, way not normal. So the dad grabs his gun, takes it off safety, goes to walk to the back of the chicken house to see what's around the corner, to see what's there. But before he gets to the corner of the chicken house, he says this chicken house is 10.5 feet tall to the roof. Right as he goes walking up to the corner of that chicken house to look around it, that little boy's head pops up over the chicken house and is looking at him, already that fast. Went from sideways looking at him to now looking up over a 10.5-foot roof. He said the head pops down, he takes the gun, fires the .22 round into the air, hears something run off in the dark. He goes back to check on his family to make sure that they're okay. He's pretty weirded out. He wants to make sure everything's fine at the house because he just saw something. He's not sure what he's seeing. So the next night, they're sitting in the house, thinking that they got a ghost out there. You know, they're like, man, we got a ghost, or thinking their place is haunted. Why is it haunted now? Why is this happening all of a sudden? And they're talking about getting a preacher, getting the property blessed, right? While they're talking about all that, there's a knock at the door, he said. Like a normal knock. He gets up and goes to the door, and he said, there's nobody out there. And on the door, he said, was a solid wooden door with about head high. There was like a diamond cutout of a window where you could look out the front door, and they had like a little, he said, like heavy cloth that hung there they'd pull back. They heard it again, but this time it was on the glass, and when they pulled the cloth back, that red-headed kid's head was upside down looking through the window eye to eye at him when he done that. He actually stepped backwards and shot through the door. He said Dad never hesitated, never thought, shot through the door, ran over, grabbed another bullet for his single shot. It was a single shotgun. He said Dad broke it open in the floor. The bullet falls on the floor. He said his dad tries to put another bullet into the gun. He drops it in the floor. The mom grabs the bullet, hands it to the dad. He reloads the gun, and now he's watching the door because he's got a hole in the door. He said we sat there all night and watched that hole to make sure nothing came in. The next morning came, and he was sure that whatever was out there he'd probably shot. And he told the wife and the kid, don't come and look outside, because he thought he might have shot what appeared to be a kid, and I'm sure he didn't want him to see that. But when he looked out there, there was nothing there, nothing at all. So what he had determined happened was it was on the roof, hanging upside down, looking at him through the window, knocking on the door. The same thing as I told you is what pretty much had happened at my granny's. So they decided to call law enforcement, and when they called the law enforcement, that's whenever they got the biggest surprise they'd ever got. Law enforcement showed up, and he told them what he had been hearing and everything, and they were taking the report and everything, and okay, you know, until he said he seen a red-headed kid. He said they all got real serious then. Next thing he knew, they showed up with the bloodhounds, and they start searching his property. The dogs are running everywhere. The dogs go out to the old barn that they don't use no more, and they're having a fit. One of the guys yells for the sheriff that he's talking to and says, hey, we need you out here, hurry. He says, I follow the sheriff all the way down, and when we get to the barn, they say you may not want to come in here. Whenever they looked in the barn, they found a teddy bear laying in the barn that you would wind up, that would make those little music box sounds. But under the hay was a deceased little red-headed boy in his coveralls with a white t-shirt on, little red shoes, that had been missing from the county over from a man that was working in the garden. His son had just disappeared. So there was a family, the neighbors, that had reported seeing a bear running through there that they blamed it on, and said the bear was dragging a cub with it when they seen it running through a field. A lot of people think that might have been something else, pulling that little boy along with it, and at all this time, this creature had had that little boy with it the whole time it was messing around this house. And why it done that, nobody knows. Nobody knows why it would have even have done that. If you have any ideas, guy, why you think this thing would have had that kid with him at the house and why it would have done what it did, leave it in the comments, because this is one of those I have no idea why it would have done that. He says he can't tell his name, of course, but he said it's a story that he wanted to share and knew that it needed to be put out. He said, this is something I will never get over with and I will take to the grave with me. A lot of people on your show, Mike, have got things off their chest I could tell that they have harbored for a long time. I trust you to tell the truth and wanted to share my story with you and only you. I appreciate your show, longtime subscriber. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I hope that I gave it at least half as good as what you told me on the phone and in the email, and I hope I conveyed just kind of how sad and how weird and how scary. Thank you for watching, guys, and like I said, let me know in the comments what you think really happened. Until next time, keep your head on a swivel. We'll see you Saturday night at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time, and don't be something's dinner.